Welcome to the Fashion Algorithm, the show where we distill complex topics into the insights that truly matter. Today, we're diving deep into something it's impacting everything from global shipping lanes right down to your next online purchase. We're talking about the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran and their far-reaching effects on the global fashion e-commerce industry. We've sifted through a lot of reports, expert analyses, and recent data to bring you the essential knowledge.
It's definitely a turbulent landscape right now. And our goal in this deep dive is really to unpack, the critical supply chain vulnerabilities, those surprising shifts in consumer confidence we're seeing across different markets, and also the emerging digital infrastructure risks, which are becoming more and more apparent. We want to show you why this isn't just some regional issue over there, but something fundamentally reshaping how value is perceived and delivered in fashion worldwide.
Absolutely. And you might be asking yourself, okay, how does a conflict thousands of miles away actually affect the new pair of jeans I'm looking at online? We're about to connect those dots for you. This deep dive into the fashion algorithm is brought to you by Cloutfit.ai. Cloutfit.ai connects influencer outfits directly to your product inventory, making their content instantly shoppable. It helps drive more sales and higher order value. You can visit cloutfit.ai to learn more. Okay, so let's start by setting the stage. Let's unpack this geopolitical situation first and see how it's impacting fashion e-commerce.
Yeah, what's become really clear, and quite fascinating actually, is how quickly a localized conflict can ripple out globally. These long-standing tensions between Israel and Iran, they escalated dramatically back on June 12, 2025. There were military actions targeting key Iranian facilities, and Iran, well, they swiftly condemned these actions, called it a declaration of war, and vowed a pretty severe response.
Right, and that came after intelligence reports suggested Iran was getting very close to nuclear breakout capability.
That's exactly. With uranium enrichment hitting 60%, which is, well, it's near weapons-grade material. That really raised the stakes.
And since then, we've seen direct military exchanges, Israeli airstrikes, reports of casualties, including senior military figures in Iran, and then missile retaliations from Iran's side.
hmm
The U.S. is in a tricky spot, right? Talking diplomacy, but also moving military assets into the region.
Absolutely. It creates this huge amount of unpredictability. Any perceived misstep, any calculation error
Mm.
could just rapidly broaden the hostilities. And that prevents any quick return to, normalcy in global markets.
Which leads to the big question for us today.
Yeah. How does an industry like fashion e-commerce, which is so globally interconnected, so reliant on speed and complex supply chains, how does it even begin to cope with this level of volatility?
That's the core of it, isn't it? Especially when you think that, the global fashion e-commerce market has been booming, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region. Projections were showing MENA e-commerce hitting something like, what, $80.3 billion by 2029? That's huge growth.
An incredible figure. Yeah, an 11.7% compound annual growth rate. And the drivers for that growth in MENA are pretty clear. High internet and smartphone use, a really large tech-savvy youth population. Over half the people there are under 30. Plus, supportive government initiatives like Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030.
And we've seen local players really take off, too.
Definitely. Marketplaces like Noon and Namshi have thrived. And mobile commerce is king there, nearly 79% of transactions.
Yeah.
Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, they're basically primary sales channels now.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, maybe counterintuitive. Despite this amazing growth, fashion e-commerce is inherently fragile, isn't it?
It really is. It leans so heavily on these complex global supply chains that makes it incredibly susceptible to geopolitical shocks like this.
Yeah.
And you add fast fashion's rapid trend cycles into the mix.
Right, it just amplifies all the vulnerabilities.
Exactly. So the MENA region, which is this major growth engine,
Yeah.
it's also uniquely vulnerable because of its proximity to the conflict. It's this critical paradox. The markets with the most potential growth are also the most directly exposed. And like we touched on, this rapid digital transformation also opens up a whole new set of risks, especially around cybersecurity.
Okay, let's follow that thread. Supply chain tremors. How does this conflict mess with getting clothes from, say, a factory in Asia to someone's closet in Europe or the US? It starts with shipping, right?
It absolutely starts with shipping.
Yeah.
And the conflict is causing massive ripples in global maritime trade. We need to talk about the choke point.
Like the Strait of Hormuz?
Precisely. Handles about 26% of global oil, a third of global LNG that's liquefied natural gas.
Right.
It's vital. Iran has warned it could close it. But even just making it too dangerous for commercial passage, as they put it.
That would be enough to cause chaos.
Huge disruption. You'd see insurance premiums skyrocket, massive delays.
Yeah.
It would hit global shipping hard.
And we're already seeing that play out in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, aren't we? That crucial link between Europe and Asia.
We are. Those Houthi attacks have led to, get this, a 75% decrease in container ship volumes through the Suez Canal in 2024 compared to the previous year.
75%, that's staggering. So where are the ships going?
They're forced to reroute the long way around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. That adds typically 10 to 15 days to the voyage and something like an extra 8,000 to 10,000 kilometers.
Wow. And that means more fuel.
Way more fuel costs, plus higher shipping insurance because of the longer, potentially riskier routes. And all of that translates directly into inflationary pressures. It means higher prices for fashion goods bought online, globally. We saw the Plastic Container Index, that's a key benchmark for shipping costs, peak at over $5,200 for a standard large container in early 2024, a clear sign of those rising costs.
So it's not just a delay, it's a cost increase that ultimately you, the consumer, might end up paying.
That's often how it works, yes.
But it's not just the ships on the water. What about getting the raw materials and actually making the clothes?
Good point. That's feeling the pinch, too. Take Jordan's garment industry. They export a lot to the U.S. They were hit really hard by the Red Sea blockades. Why? Because of their precarious positioning, as one report put it. They rely on inputs, materials coming from East and South Asia. When those were delayed, production just stalled.
Could they source elsewhere?
They tried. They looked at sourcing locally, maybe from Egypt or Turkey, but they ran into problems replacing certain high-quality synthetic fabrics. It highlights that trade-off, building resilience versus maintaining the quality customers expect.
So what happened? Did factories shut down?
We saw some big players like Adidas reportedly cancel orders with Jordanian factories and reroute them, maybe to places like Cambodia. Smaller factories. Some had to resort to really expensive air freight just to meet deadlines. Others ended up producing for local markets, but at much lower profit margins. It just shows how fragile that globalized model can be.
Okay, so materials are delayed, manufacturing is disrupted, shipping takes weeks longer. What about the final step, getting it to the customer's door? That last mile.
That gets hit too. That extra 10-14 days on the water is especially disruptive for fast fashion. Their whole model is built on speed, just-in-time inventory, reacting to trends instantly.
Right. A 2-week delay means those trendy items might be total out of style by the time they arrive.
Exactly. It fundamentally undermines their efficiency. You get missed sales windows, tons of obsolete inventory, basically, clothes no one wants anymore. And even within the MENA region, last-mile delivery was already a big challenge, identified as the main growth hurdle for 42% of e-commerce firms there. Shipping times vary a lot, maybe 2-3 days in the UAE, but stretch to 5-7 days in Saudi Arabia or Egypt.
Yeah.
Add global delays on top of that.
It becomes a real headache. So what are brands actually doing to cope? Are they just accepting the delays and costs?
No, they're adapting,
Yeah.
or trying to. Nearshoring and regionalized supply chains are definitely gaining traction. The idea is shifting production closer to the end markets. Think Latin America, Eastern Europe, North Africa.
So making things closer to where they'll be sold?
Precisely. Reduces lead times, cuts down on those long, vulnerable shipping routes. We're seeing big names like Zara, H&M, Uniqlo already integrating these kinds of models.
And diversifying suppliers too, I imagine, not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Absolutely crucial. Spreading production across multiple regions minimizes that over-reliance on one single source or route. Air freight has seen a bit of a bump up, about 11% for urgent shipments, but it's just too expensive to be a sustainable long-term fix for most.
So it's a real strategic shift then, moving away from just chasing the lowest possible cost.
I think so. It's a move towards prioritizing resilience and agility, even if it costs a bit more upfront. And that's fundamentally reshaping global trade flows in fashion.
Okay, let's shift focus from the supply chain, the logistics to, well, us, the consumers. How is all this affecting our confidence, our spending habits?
Well, the conflict itself, combined with other global economic headwinds, it definitely contributes to a slower global growth forecast for 2025. What's really concerning is the potential for crude oil prices to surge if the conflict widens. That would hit consumer spending and business investment hard. And a full-scale regional war. I mean, some analysts suggest that could even lead to hyperinflation, maybe even a severe global recession if economic activity just grinds to a halt.
Scary stuff. And are we seeing the effects already in how people feel about spending?
We are. In the U.S., consumer confidence took a dive. People are worried about tariffs, inflation, just the general geopolitical volatility, and that led to a noticeable drop in retail sales. Similarly, in Europe, confidence fell more sharply than expected back in March 2025. Again, inflation worries, stalled growth.
So people get nervous and they save more, spend less.
That's the typical precautionary behavior, yes. More saving, less spending, especially on non-essential items, and fashion often falls into that category for many.
But does this play out the same everywhere? What about the MENA region we talked about with its booming e-commerce?
Ah, that's where it gets interesting. Because in contrast to the West, the MENA e-commerce marketplace like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, it's still experiencing, quote, unprecedented growth. Driven by that young, tech-savvy population and government support we mentioned, Saudi Arabia alone is projected to hit nearly $24 billion by 2029.
So even though their consumer sentiment might have dipped slightly in early 2025, kind of mirroring global trends.
Right. Despite those short-term dips, the underlying economic fundamentals there, plus a pretty robust luxury market, suggest more resilience compared to, say, the US or Europe. However, here's a really critical insight for brands operating there.
Yeah.
Trust is paramount. One study found 71% of MENA consumers simply won't buy from a company they don't trust.
71%. That's
Yep.
huge. Trust is everything there.
It really is. Now, back in the USA and Europe, the picture's quite different, quite a bit starker. Consumers are actively telling researchers they plan to cut back on discretionary items, clothes, shoes. Over 41% were cutting back on apparel spending in early 2025. And it's not just mass market. Even the luxury segment felt it. High-income shoppers were reducing purchases from top-tier brands, too.
So what does that mean for the market? Does it split somehow?
It seems likely, yeah. We might see a kind of bifurcation. People either trading down, looking for cheaper value alternatives, or, interestingly, maybe investing in really durable, high-quality pieces that they know will last a long time. Less disposable fashion.
That makes sense. But there's also a psychological element too, right? Anxiety doesn't always lead to saving.
No, that's a fascinating point. While uncertainty often triggers saving, anxiety can also, paradoxically, spur impulsive buys, sort of self-soothing purchases. Fashion can become a coping mechanism. People might seek comfort in nostalgic styles or maybe a sense of control through practical, functional pieces. Or they might swing the other way towards glamorous escapism, buying bold statement items to, feel better for a moment.
So an emotional spend opportunity for brands, perhaps?
Potentially, yes. And consumers might also be more open to trying novel or maybe smaller brands, especially if those brands can position themselves as somehow less harmful or less tied up in the global complexities of the conflict. It really means brands need to rethink what value means. It's not just about price anymore. It's about durability, ethical sourcing, that emotional connection.
And people are definitely watching prices more closely.
Oh, absolutely. 54% are checking prices online more often, and there's a strong, growing preference for local products, too. 68% said they prefer to buy local.
Why local? Is it just supporting local businesses?
That's part of it, yeah. Supporting local brands. But price is also a factor, and sometimes environmental concerns, shorter shipping distances, potentially.
And does politics play into which country's products people buy?
Increasingly so. 58% of global consumers are paying more attention to a product's country of origin. This definitely reinforces a kind of brand nationalism in some developed markets, which means global fashion brands really need a multi-local strategy tailoring their approach region by region.
Okay, so we've got supply chain chaos, shifting consumer moods, but there's another battleground opening up, one that's maybe less visible but just as critical: cyber warfare.
Yes. As e-commerce becomes so central to fashion, it inevitably becomes a target, or at least collateral damage, in these geopolitical conflicts.
And this isn't just hypothetical, is it?
Not at all. Cyber warfare is a pervasive, persistent threat. It doesn't just target military sites anymore. It goes after critical civilian systems, cloud platforms, supply chains, financial systems. The aim is often to paralyze confidence, destabilize economies. And the Israel-Iran conflict has absolutely spilled over into cyberspace very rapidly.
We've seen reports flying back and forth, right? Israel allegedly hitting Iranian financial infrastructure with cyber strikes.
Yes, and Iran responding with quite sophisticated disinformation campaigns, even using AI-generated media deepfakes and the like to distort online narratives and sow confusion. Plus, you have state-sponsored hacking groups and various hacktivist groups just ramping up their operations on all sides.
So why should a fashion brand or someone shopping for clothes online worry about this? They're not military targets.
They're not direct military targets, no. But e-commerce platforms are incredibly attractive soft targets. Think about it. They handle huge volumes of sensitive customer data names, addresses, payment details. They rely completely on digital infrastructure to operate, and they're very public-facing. We've already seen high-profile breaches at big fashion names like Dior and M&S in the past. It signals that vulnerability is real.
So a cyber attack isn't just about maybe losing some money.
Oh, it's far beyond that. It can severely damage a brand's reputation, which can take years to rebuild. It can completely halt operations. Imagine your website being down during a peak sales period. And it erodes consumer trust. Remember that 71% figure in MENA. If customers don't trust you with their data, they won't buy from you. It's that simple.
What kind of attacks are we talking about? Is it just hacking into databases?
It's a range of threats. Things like e-skimming. That's where malicious code steals payment details right from the checkout form on a website. Phishing attacks, trying to trick employees or customers into giving up passwords or credentials. Malware infections, DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service that flood a website with traffic to knock it offline. And of course, ransomware, where attackers encrypt a company's data and demand payment to unlock it.
The consequences sound severe.
They are brand damage, terrible press, missed sales opportunities, potentially huge regulatory fines depending on the data breached, and that long-term loss of consumer confidence. And what's really crucial to understand is the interconnectedness. A cyber attack doesn't even have to hit the fashion brand directly. An attack on one of their key logistics partners or a payment processor they use
Can ripple through their entire operation.
exactly. It can bring their whole e-commerce ecosystem grinding to a halt.
So what can businesses do? How do they defend themselves in this kind of environment? It sounds overwhelming.
It requires a really robust cyber defense posture. It's not just about firewalls anymore. It means things like segmenting IT systems, so if one part is breached, it doesn't compromise everything. Adopting what's called zero trust security.
Zero trust. What's that?
It basically means you don't automatically trust anyone or anything, even if they're already inside your network. Every user, every device has to be continuously verified before getting access to resources. It also means maintaining strong, isolated backups crucial for ransomware recovery. Rigorous vendor risk management, knowing the security practices of all your third-party partners, and ongoing workforce training, because employees are often the first line of defense against things like phishing.
So investing in security isn't just an IT expense anymore.
Not at all. Investing in advanced cybersecurity solutions, leveraging digital tools like AI and data analytics for better monitoring, for better demand forecasting, better logistics, it's moved beyond being just a cost center. For fashion brands today, it's a strategic imperative. It's about business continuity, protecting brand reputation, safeguarding consumer trust, and ultimately maintaining your market presence in this really volatile world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground supply chains, consumer behavior, cyber threats. Let's pull it all together. What are the key strategic imperatives for fashion e-commerce businesses trying to navigate this storm? What do they need to do?
Well, if we connect all these threads, the single biggest imperative, I think, is building resilience and agility right into the supply chain. That's number one. That means diversification, not relying on one country or one supplier. Spreading the risk across multiple geographic regions, proactively building relationships with new partners before you desperately need them.
And embracing that nearshoring or regionalization trend we talked about.
Definitely. Moving manufacturing closer to your main consumer markets, Latin America, Eastern Europe, North Africa, depending on where you sell, that shortens lead times, reduces transportation risks and costs. That just makes sense now.
What about inventory? Can they still run lean with just-in-time?
It's much harder, much riskier now. So strategic inventory management becomes key. This likely means moving beyond strict just-in-time. It probably involves holding buffer stocks, keeping a bit more inventory on hand for critical materials or maybe your most popular core products, just in case of disruption. And exploring multimodal transport using a flexible mix of sea, road, maybe even rail or air when needed, gives you options when one route gets blocked.
Technology must play a huge role in managing all this complexity.
Absolutely paramount. Investing in tech for better visibility and agility. We're talking AI and data analytics for more accurate demand forecasting, knowing what customers will want, when, and where. Using tech to optimize logistics routes in real time, track shipments accurately. It's about turning all that data into genuinely actionable intelligence so you can manage the supply chain proactively, not just reactively.
Okay, supply chain resilience is key. What else? How do they need to adapt their front-end strategies, marketing, pricing?
You definitely need to adapt there too. Dynamic pricing might become more common, adjusting prices more frequently to account for those rising input costs, but still needing to communicate value clearly to consumers who are feeling the pinch. Optimizing the product portfolio is also important. Really looking at what you're selling. Does it align with these shifting consumer preferences? Maybe expanding the range of value-driven alternatives, or doubling down on those durable, timeless pieces that people might invest in.
And the messaging needs to change too.
Yes, the marketing messages need to evolve. Less focus perhaps purely on fleeting trends and more emphasis on value, on durability, sustainability credentials, local origin if that's relevant. And critically, like we discussed, brands can potentially tap into those psychological needs that arise during anxious times, the need for comfort or control or even escapism. Position fashion as a tool for self-expression and well-being.
And underpinning all of that is trust, right? Especially in places like Manila.
Non-negotiable. Fostering consumer trust and brand loyalty is absolutely critical in uncertain times. How do you do that? Well, enhanced transparency is a big one. Being open about your supply chain practices, your ethical commitments, cultivating local relevance, that multi-local approach again, offering region-specific payment options, running culturally sensitive marketing campaigns.
And just good old-fashioned customer service.
Can't forget the basics. Exceptional customer service. Making sure delivery is as smooth as possible despite the challenges, having transparent and easy return policies. These things build immense loyalty. And one more thing, engaging authentically. Using trusted local voices, maybe local influencers, building community networks, that can be really effective in fostering deeper trust than just generic global campaigns. So when you look at the bigger picture, what's fascinating here is that this conflict, the Israeli-Iran situation, it's really adding this intense new layer of complexity onto fashion e-commerce. It's accelerating trends that were already bubbling under the surface, and it's forcing a pretty fundamental rethink of established business models. From these supply chain shocks to the shifts in consumer psychology, the escalating cyber threats, adaptability, resilience, strategic investment, they're not just nice-to-haves or competitive advantages anymore. They're absolutely essential for survival.
That really sums it up. That's it for this deep dive into the fashion algorithm. Wow. This conversation has made it crystal clear that the current geopolitical climate means businesses absolutely have to focus on building deep trust, making their supply chains truly resilient, and getting a much better handle on evolving consumer psychology.
Absolutely. And remember, the ability to actually navigate these really multifaceted challenges, that's what will determine who truly thrives in this new, uncertain era of global commerce.
A huge thank you for joining us on the fashion algorithm. If you found this deep dive valuable, maybe learned something new, please do share it with a friend or a colleague who might find it interesting. And please subscribe to make sure you don't miss our next deep dive. The fashion algorithm is brought to you by Cloutfit.ai. Remember, Cloutfit.ai connects influencer outfits directly to your product inventory, making content instantly shoppable, driving more sales and higher order value. You can learn more by visiting cloutfit.ai. We'll catch you next time.